Hello everyone. Before I get into the main part of the video, I just want to remind everyone we'll be back to the normal upload schedule from this video on. There may be the odd extra video thrown in here and there, but there won't be an extra video next Wednesday, so it'll be back to the 2-week schedule for videos. So no video next week. There will be a video on Wednesday the week after, and then obviously occasionally there may be the odd extra video slotted in here and there, but by and large we're back to the normal upload schedule from here on out. Obviously, we were looking at East German kit in the last 2 videos, and the reason for making an extra video was the huge amount of newer stuff that arrived in 2 different lots, so it made sense to make another video looking at that and upload it as an extra. We're looking at East German kit again here, but something a bit more substantive, and we're going to be looking at some flares, various hand signals, illumination flares. We're going to run over these in a bit of detail, talk about their issue, how they were carried and used. So that's what we're going to have a look at now.
So here we have the various hand signals or flares we're going to look at. This isn't comprehensive by any means, and there is another one we'll look at in just a minute, which is a bit different. But this is the sort of standard size of hand signal, and certainly one of the standard types. There is also an example where you sort of split and twist and then push a button and they fire, which are possibly a bit of a later development compared to these. I think the latest date on these is on this red 1-star flare, and the use by date is November of 89. The production date is 85, November of 85, which gives a 4-year sort of lifespan for these. From the top, we have 2 single-star red signals, a 3-star green signal, a 1-star white signal, a blue smoke signal, and then here a hand illumination flare. We have another one of those to look at in a minute, which is considerably larger than these, which is a parachute flare. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. Have a look at these first of all. They all fire in a very similar way. This is the latest example, as I say, but they're all made basically to the pattern. And they have, you can see these have been fired. They're all inert. Inside here, you have a cord attached to the screw cap on the end here. And you can see there's a rubber seal in there to keep these waterproof. And then you'd pull this and the wire would be inside that hole inside. You can see there. And that would, of course, operate the firing mechanism when pulled out. So that's very simple. You would unscrew and pull, and that would fire the flare. And obviously, you'd hold it upright. You have instructions here. In fact, you can see there. Pull down, and it launches the flare out of the top, the signal. And very similar equivalents to these in various NATO armies and in other Warsaw Pact armies, I would imagine. Of course, these were extensively issued and used in some instances on the border, and particularly useful at night, illumination flares and signal flares for signalling where there had been a discovery of an attempted escape, for example. It was quite common. And you can see here, the designation on here is Ein Stern Handsignal Rot. Slightly different than here. Handsignal Ein Stern Rot is the earlier designation, but that literally means 1-star flare hand signal red. And these are designated as well by a nub on the end of the cap here, which is obviously for easy identification in the dark. So if you reached into a pouch, you'd be able to feel that's a single star red. And you can see here a 3-star green with 3 ticks. So if this was a 2-star green, you'd have 2, a 1-star green, you'd have 1. But the different shape allows you to identify what you've got just by feel. And you can see Handsignal 3 Stern Grün, and then the same instructions basically. Now, I'm not sure of the date here, whether 90 is the expiration date of this one. I don't know. But you obviously have all the instructions there. You can pause and read these should you wish to. They're very similar from flare to flare. The next one here is Ein Stern Handsignal Weiß. And you can see here this one is just slightly earlier than the other one, but the use by effectively is the December of 1988. And this has the designator on the end of a single circle, which you can feel there. Whether this particular example was made in multiple stars, in a version that fired multiple stars, I don't know. But certainly the red were made in 2 and 3 as well as 1, and the green were made in 1 and 2 as well as 3, as we have here. I believe there was also a yellow version that was made in the combination, the 3 different versions, so 1, 2 and 3 star. Slightly different one here is Handsignal Rauch Blau, and Rauch means smoke, so this would be a smoke signal. Slightly different interior look to it. You see everything is burned away there, but the firing mechanism is basically exactly the same. You have a wire which has been placed back inside there, but you have a wire and a cord there which allows this to be fired in exactly the same manner as with the other hand signals. Obviously the cap screws on there, so you can see that down in there. No content, sorry if I bring that into shot, I'm looking down at it, but you see no content in there. Someone's just fed the wire back into the firing mechanism at the bottom there. And then you have Handleuchtzeichen, and you can see here exactly the same mechanism for firing and so forth, held in exactly the same way to fire, and the cap there. And the marker for this one, the blue one, doesn't have anything, interestingly. It's just plain. This one has a single bar there, a single sort of nub on the end there, elongated rather than just being a point like for the red ones. So again, you've got a clear way of identifying this in the dark just by feel. So that's the sort of collection I have of these sort of standard smaller flares. Towards the end of the video, we'll look at a large parachute flare. I just want to go into a little bit more detail about these. We'll first of all look at how they were typically carried, or one example of how they were carried in the field for use. And then we'll move on and have a look at how they were issued, the tins they came in, and then we'll have a look at the parachute flare towards the end. So here we have a standard MPI-KM ammunition pouch, and it's not that uncommon to see Grenztruppen carrying 2 sets of ammunition pouches, a member of a patrol, for example, and you can carry the flares in the standard MPI-KM ammunition pouch. You can close the flap just fine. The smaller flares, the standard sort of size, are a good fit within. You can fit 2 in each of the pockets, probably only carrying 4. In fact, there's a set of equipment which is purportedly that of a border guard who escaped to the west, and his kit was then photographed after the fact. And there are 4 flares in his second ammunition pouch, which is on the belt of the equipment. There are also certain photographs of troops carrying 2 sets of pouches and 1. It's possible to make out that there are probably flares within the second pouch. Generally, of course, only 1 ammunition pouch was carried just for the magazines, but in certain instances, a member of a patrol would potentially carry a second ammunition pouch like this in order to carry flares. There are also reports of RPK pouches being used and actually modified with a separate shoulder strap, and there was a specific pouch design which could carry the PSE, the field telephone, basically, that allowed you to plug into the border telephone network, and the flares in one, but they were generally left in the post, from what I've understood, as opposed to being carried, but that's what they were intended for. This is certainly an example which there is photographic evidence for carrying them in here. You'd have another 2. I've wrapped these in plastic, and this is the plastic packaging from round cotton pads for makeup removal and various other things. Obviously, we have a very young son, so we get through quite a lot of those. So I've salvaged the plastic packaging, but the flares were issued in plastic bags, or certainly there's photographic evidence to show they were carried in plastic bags like this, presumably for waterproofing. And the photograph of the kit of the escapee shows the flares in plastic bags. So I've replicated that here. Get another couple of these, another couple of flares in the pouch, and that will give you an idea of basically how his kit was set up and how he was carrying the flares. So that's just one example of how these were carried in the field. As I say, there were other expedients for this as well, RPK pouches. There was a specifically designed pouch, but my understanding is they weren't generally carried. They were a bit big and bulky, and were often left in the post with sort of flares stored in them, and a smaller number would be taken out on patrol as required. So that's the way they were often carried in the field. We'll have a look at one of the tins that these were issued in now and just quickly talk through that, and then we'll have a look at the parachute flare. So what we have here is an example of the tins in which these were issued, and there are all sorts of these with different markings on the outside. Generally the colour matches the colour of the flares carried within, and you have here from saying Handsignaler 3 Stern Grün, so 15 hand signals, hand flares, 3-star green, and instructions down the front here. Various stamps here, the date, possibly here the expiration date, 781. And it's a metal tin with a screw cap. And you can see here there's a rubber seal in here which should be glued in place, but the glue's come away. And then you can see it's tinned inside. And there would be a fitting in the bottom into which the flares would slot to stop them rattling around, and then they could be withdrawn easily. Obviously, you'd take the ones out from underneath the cap first of all, and then you'd easily be able to get to the others in the tin. And that's how they were transported and initially issued out from these tins. So just an example of that there, sort of completing the picture of the smaller hand signals. And we'll move on now to have a look at the parachute illumination flare. And this is the parachute illumination flare inside this aluminium tube. Rather nice illustration there with the illumination sort of designator of a sort of sun here with the parachute over the top. And you can see we have some stamps here. I guess 793 may be the expiration date for this. Open it up. And you can see here it is considerably bigger. If I bring in one of the flares we were looking at before, this is considerably larger. Of course it needs to be because it contains a parachute and presumably a larger propellant charge to get more altitude as well. But you can see here, you have the designation there, and the instructions are essentially the same because it's fired in the same manner, but you have an elevation indicator here, and this is coated with luminous paint, which still works in the dark, which is quite nice. And obviously that would give you an indication of elevation, basically vertical through the angle here to obviously not horizontal there, but it gives you an idea of elevation on the side there. You can see various markings on here, and the firing mechanism is exactly the same as we saw before. There's a cap there with a cord and then a wire which actually fires the mechanism within, or ignites the charge to fire the flare. So that's a look through all of the different sort of flares I have in my collection. It's not comprehensive by any means, but hopefully it's been interesting looking through these, and it's something I'd like to expand on. They're quite easy to store away, and they're a useful thing for displays, sort of to illustrate the various different signals which were available to the MVA, and Grenzstruppen in particular, for obviously my interest. So there it is, just a quick run through these various East German flares.
So I do hope you found this video interesting. I'm hoping to expand the collection going forward. It'd be nice to get some examples of the other flares which were produced. There are other examples out there, and some of the sort of different numbers of stars and so forth for the colours I already have would be nice as well. So we'll see. I've already picked up another red flare which hasn't arrived yet, but that will obviously arrive, presumably in an unboxing video if I make one for the next lot of stuff which arrives, which I probably will, so keep an eye out for that. As I say, if you have found this interesting, you'd like to see future uploads like unboxing videos, content like this, talking about things in more detail, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. And that will of course alert you when I upload future videos. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.